You ever get the feeling that karma's just sitting on your porch, sipping coffee, waiting for the perfect moment to drop an anvil on someone's head? That's pretty much what happened on my little slice of earth. The same patchwork garden where my wife's ashes mixed with the soil, and where an HOA president tried to bulldoze not just my roses, but my whole damn life. You think a $5,000 fine for an ugly garden's rough? Try finding out someone poisoned your dying wife's favorite roses, try to swipe your inheritance, then nearly torched her grave, all in the name of community standards. The kicker? Karma arrived wearing a federal badge and an archaeologist's hat. And what happened next, well, let's just say some folks should never bet against true love or history. When my wife Sarah was dying, hospice lights humming, chemo bags dangling like some sick joke, I held her hand and she squeezed back just once fierce. Promise me you'll restore Grandma's garden, Marcus. Bury my ashes there. That was her final wish, and damn if I didn't swear I would. Months later, when Delilah Thornfield, president of our HOA, strolled up with her red nails and fake sympathy, she looked around that wild garden and spat. Dead people don't need gardens, Marcus. Time to face reality and sell. What Delilah didn't know, what nobody did, was that Sarah's ashes were already feeding those roses. Every time I watered them, it felt like I was keeping a promise and talking to her all over again. But Delilah, she was just getting started. See, my grandmothers will have left me the house and the garden, but it was Sarah who'd done the research. One afternoon, before the hospital made everything smell like disinfectant and despair, Sarah showed me this stack of yellow documents. Your grandma built a legal trap, Marcus. They're the trust fund, $750,000, but only if the garden stays a living memorial. Sarah saw it coming before I did. The greed, the games, the fight over dirt and memory. Delilah, though she'd been planning for years. Both her and Sarah had lived next door to my grandmother, but where Sarah sat and listened to old stories, Delilah counted every penny in her head. When the will named Sarah the heir, Delilah's smile cracked. And underneath was this shark sniffing blood. She started small, citations for neighbors, helpful recommendations for assisted living. Frank down the street, a vet who loved his sunflowers, suddenly had his utilities cut and found a buyer just when he couldn't pay his fines. Same with Miss Eleanor, who'd bake bread for every new neighbor. Her house sold for peanuts after a flood of violations. It was a pattern. Make life hell, swoop in for the kill. So when Sarah died, Delilah showed up with crocodile tears and a business card. Sarah wouldn't want you to struggle, Marcus. Why not start fresh? I know some buyers. Sure you do, Delilah. Sure you do. I didn't sell. That's when the real war started. First, the roses died, just withered up overnight. Herbicide overspray, Delilah claimed, a community beautification accident. My hand shook as I touched those brown petals, knowing they were the last things Sarah had picked out. Then came the $5,000 fine. 30 days to correct violations or face legal action. The deadline? The anniversary of Sarah's death. I knelt in that poisoned dirt, feeling the world go silent except for the creak of the wind chimes Sarah loved. That's when I realized this wasn't just about grass height or mailbox color. This was about memory, love, and a promise. I started digging, figuratively, then literally. Delilah escalated. One morning, I found Sarah's memorial stone and the wind chimes gone, violating policy. Next day, anonymous calls to Adult Protective Services, neighbors whispering about how I was unstable. Fine, Delilah. You want to play games? Let's play. I visited Eleanor in her new apartment. She poured tea, hands shaking. Delilah found things to fine me for that I'd never even heard of, she said. Window box too high. Sidewalk cracks. The fines piled up. When I couldn't pay, she said I should move. The company that bought her house traced back to Delilah through a stack of LLCs. Back home, I found Sarah's notes. She'd been tracking everything, right down to Delilah's fake smiles. If you're reading this, "Marcus, Delilah is making her move," she'd written. "The garden is legal protection. Don't let her steal it." I cried, reading her words, part anger, part relief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. That's when Delilah got bold. Sent in a crew to cut down the century-old oak shading Sarah's grave. "Unsafe," they said, chainsaws roaring. I stood my ground. "Show me a permit." They backed off, nervous, but I knew Delilah was just testing me. Then, out of nowhere, Helen Martinez, the city archivist, called me, her voice bubbling like spring water. "Marcus, your garden isn't just special, it's historic. Your grandmother was the town's first female botanist. Those roses? They're original to the founder's estate, possibly unique." Sarah had known. She always knew. The next move was a legal bombshell. Delilah filed for adverse possession, claiming she'd maintained the disputed garden strip for a decade. She had faked receipts, staged photos, neighbors willing to say she'd cared for the land. She even reported me for illegal burial practices, sending the health department to photograph Sarah's resting place. I hired a private investigator, Miguel Santos, shark in human form. Within days, he'd traced Delilah's web of property theft. A dozen homes, all flipped for profit, old folks pushed out by harassment and lies. Sarah Morin, an investigative reporter, got wind and published the story. HOA president targets widow, turns memorial garden into battleground. The town went nuts. Support poured in, donations for legal defense. Neighbors apologizing for believing Delilah's stories. But the twist? That came when Dr. Patricia Reeves from the university tested the garden soil. "Marcus, you've got extinct plant genes here. This garden isn't just historic, it's priceless." Next, the archaeologists rolled in with ground-penetrating radar. "These aren't just roses. Your wife's memorial sits on the original town founder's homestead. Federal law protects this site now." Delilah's empire started to crack. Bank records subpoenaed, developer cash traced to her account, IRS sniffing around. She got desperate, hiring a thug to torch the garden. Security cameras caught every step. The FBI was already on her tail, listening in as she paid the arsonist to make it look like an accident. They nabbed him before a match could strike. Cornered, Delilah tried blackmail, rumors, even staged a breakdown at Sarah's grave, howling about what should have been mine. It was pitiful and ugly, the final unraveling of a bully who'd never been told no. Then came the town hall, the place packed, media everywhere, the air humming like a live wire. Eleanor testified about Delilah's intimidation, frank about losing his healing space. The United States Attorney read out the charges: 15 counts of fraud, RICO violations, arson, bribery, abuse of the elderly. Delilah got 27 years. Her co-conspirators, real estate crooks, county officials, a mortgage broker, all swept up in the storm. Sarah's memorial garden? Now a federal historic site, a living lab for rare plants, drawing researchers and tourists from everywhere. The annual Love Grows Eternal festival funds scholarships and PTSD programs for veterans, just the way Sarah would have wanted. But here's the thing. The real lesson didn't come from the courtroom or the scientists. It came from Sarah. She knew love is stubborn, like roots winding through stone. She knew that memory can outlast cruelty, that the worst storms sometimes water the seeds for miracles. You ask where justice comes from? Sometimes it's a law. Sometimes it's a community standing up. But most times, it's just one person who refuses to let love be bulldozed for profit. The next time someone tells you to move on, or that dead people don't need gardens, remember my wife's roses and the way history, real, living, breathing history, has a funny way of fighting back. Now, maybe you've been through something like this. Maybe you've seen power abused or watched a bully push too far. So let me ask, where's the line between fighting for what's right and letting go? When does defending a promise become the very thing that saves not just memory, but a whole community's soul? Drop your thoughts below. Share your own stories. Let's see if love really does grow eternal, even in the hardest ground.